If we go back to the Windy Woods and we next look at the sprite player walk, we can see that he's walking over quite a few frames, and that he's facing to the right. So just like with a previous exercise, we need to make sure that when we replace this asset with our own graphics, that our character is facing to the right. So we'll also notice that it's broadcasting a message, a footstep. That's what these little icons right here are. And basically this is saying that when the playhead hits that frame, it's going to play the sound of the footstep. So there are 2 footstep broadcasts, 1 for each foot. Okay, now before we go any further, I want to talk a little bit about how I created this asset. So I started off in Procreate and I just really quickly sketched out a gnome playing a guitar. I didn't have a lot of time and I was trying to get this demo done. So I did this and I was like, you know what, this is too crappy looking for me and I don't have time to do something better right now. But I need something that's going to be a placeholder so that I can do better graphics later. So I took this into Sora, which is generative AI, and I asked it to basically keep the color palette the same, make the graphics very flat, and basically to give me 2 different versions of this gnome playing a guitar. So I was very specific. So if we want to look at the prompts, it gave me 2 different versions. I ended up going with this one. I said, clean up, it's a little bit below the screen, but it said, clean up this rough illustration of a gnome playing a guitar, keep the colors and the flat graphics. And so I did that, and that's how I generated that gnome. I tried to make an idle animation of that gnome, but it really didn't exaggerate it enough. So there's some things that you can do that work pretty well, but in this case, trying to make an idle animation of the gnome, it was just too static. And I realized, time-wise, it was going to be faster for me to just bring in the one sprite into Photoshop, use the Puppet Warp tool, than to try to futz around with generative AI to try to make that idle animation. Now, someday it might be faster or easier, but just using Sora at that instant, it just wasn't. All right, now to make that side view, I'm facing the same time crunch. So I went ahead and I said, go ahead and give me 2 different versions of this gnome playing a guitar. And then I'm going to just try and see if I can make a sprite sheet of him doing a run. If I can do that relatively quickly, I'll use that. But otherwise, I'll just go ahead and do the same thing I did before and create it in Photoshop using this to sort of save me a little time. All right, so I went ahead and did some AI generation, and I just wanted to show you the results and show you some of the pros and cons of this workflow at this moment. Now, you've probably heard it before, you're going to hear it again. Generative AI is the worst it will ever be right now. It's just going to probably get better. So in this case, I did generate a sprite sheet, but they did not, it's basically the same leg poses every single frame. Like there's a little bit more of a bent knee here, but that's it. So that won't really work as a walk cycle, as we'll talk about in class. So what I then need to really think about is, okay, how else can I do this? So I tried giving a couple different prompts, but it really didn't understand it. And it was getting to that line of, is it taking me more time to try to come up with the right prompt and get the best results, fighting against sort of the limitations of the software as it is right now? Or, should I just go ahead and do it by hand? Well, sometimes you just actually need to try a different AI. There is an AI called Ludo.ai, and Ludo is specifically designed for game design. Ludo AI has actually been around for quite a while. It's one of the older generative AI softwares out there. And because they started off specializing on game art, their tools are actually much more adept at this sort of thing. So what I did is I went ahead and I uploaded the still image of that side view that I had. And I made the note that this is a side view of a gnome holding a guitar, create a sprite sheet of him running with his guitar. And I actually had to generate this twice because the first time his guitar turned into a guitar, which was cute, but didn't really work. So I had to specify exactly what a guitar is. And I said, look, it's basically a piano keyboard with a guitar handle attached. And I even misspelled attached. And then the second time around, it understood it. So that took hardly any time. And I'm using the free version of it, so I have sort of limited resources, but I was able to say I needed 16 frames. It only gives a couple preset sizes, so I kind of had to go with that. And then I just said to animate the sprite. Now, once I have this, I can download a couple different options. So I can download directly as a sprite sheet, or I can also download a GIF animation or the video. And what I ended up doing is using the GIF animation because to go through and set up the sprite sheet to match what I'm already using, because I can't set this size to 154 by 154, it would have just taken a lot of time to get that working right. So I just exported the GIF, which is not quite as good a quality, but again, I'm using this to speed up a workflow right now. I'm under a deadline crunch. I want to go back and revise this and make it better myself later. And I can actually exaggerate things like the hat flopping around, the beard flopping around. So I could do some animation exaggeration much better myself. But this will be a decent placeholder for now. So when you're doing a first draft of something, this is not a bad way to go. But it's probably not going to be a usable end product for a lot of reasons. All right, so then I brought my animated GIF into Photoshop, and we can see that the GIF is a little bit choppier than the video, but that's okay. We're just going to make this work. And then I had to do a little bit of work to make sure that he is roughly in the same aspect ratio as the idle pose. So in the idle pose, he's very, very closely cropped in. And the problem with that is that it doesn't give me a lot of room to animate him up and down. So what I can do is I can start manually sort of cropping this to get his feet a little bit closer to the baseline. And I have this sped up, but now I'm just cropping in the image so that it's a little bit closer and better matches that original idle. And then what I can do is I can go to image size, and I'd probably save a copy of this because, it's nice having that high resolution, but then I can change this to 154. With all the layers visible, I can do the same workflow where I go to File, Export, Layers to Files. I use Texture Packer to create the sprite sheet. You can visit that earlier video to go through how this works. And now I'm ready to import this. So I'll go to Import, and then I go to Edit Image, Image, Convert to Frames. And this time I need 16 frames. And there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames per row. And they're going to be 154 by 154. And that looks pretty good. Then I can say Convert and say yes. I'm going to go back to the sprite player walk. And so those footsteps are actually still there. So I'm doing pretty good with this. Now I need to adjust the frame rate back to 15 frames a second. And now I'm ready to go ahead and test this. So there's my idle animation. And if I use my left and right keys, he's running left and right. Now he's turning around because that's coded within it. But that seems to be working pretty good. Now, the one thing I can see, and this is where I would need to do a little bit of cleanup, is his side view. You can see he's actually floating up above the ground a little bit. Also, there's that shadow, so I'd want to go back and clean that up. So again, this is a useful placeholder. But next, we'll be able to work on the jump animations. So we're almost there.